The night before my wedding, I stood before the full-length mirror, running my fingers lightly over the delicate fabric of my wedding dress. The lace was soft, the silk shimmered faintly in the dim light of the room, and the veil, oh, the veil, was long enough to trail down the hallway if I were foolish enough to wear it that way. I couldn't help but smile. This was it. Tomorrow, I would be someone's wife. I was ready. I had always dreamed of this day, and now it was finally here. But I wasn't alone in my excitement. From the far corner of the room, my younger sister, Clara, sat cross-legged on the plush carpet, her eyes following every movement I made. She had been a fixture at my side for the past few months, helping with the details of the wedding, but there was something about the way she watched me that night, something sharp beneath the surface. "Do you really think it's perfect?" she asked quietly, almost too quietly. I looked at her, tilting my head. Clara was beautiful, more beautiful than I ever remembered being, but that was nothing new. People had always said that about her. My younger sister, the one who could step into a room and somehow make everyone else fade into the background, without even trying. "What do you mean by perfect?" I asked, glancing back at my dress. "The dress," she said, glancing at the satin fabric again, her voice laced with something that could have been envy, or perhaps something darker. "The way it fits you. It's so you, isn't it?" "Of course it's me," I said, confused by her tone. "It's my wedding dress. It should be me." But even as I said it, I noticed a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't a reflection of pride, or admiration, or anything I would have expected from my only sibling. Clara's lips parted slightly, as if she were about to say something else, but she stopped. I thought about asking her what she meant, but then my mother's voice echoed from the hallway, and the moment was gone. "Girls, stop fussing. It's time for bed. Tomorrow's going to be a big day, and you'll need your sleep." We both jumped at the sound of our mother's booming, cheerful voice. It seemed to break the tension in the room, but there was still something unsettled about it. Clara flashed me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and then she stood up, straightened her dress, and headed out the door. I stared at the mirror for a moment longer, running my fingers over the smooth fabric again. Was I imagining things? Was I just nervous about the wedding? I had no reason to suspect that my sister would do anything to spoil my special day. After all, she was the one who helped me pick the dress, yet there was an undercurrent to her behavior that I couldn't quite ignore. A subtle something that hung between us, too thick to put into words. And though I wasn't sure what it meant, I couldn't shake the feeling that it would come back to haunt me. The next morning, everything felt as it should, bright, beautiful, and full of promise. The sun streamed through the windows as I got dressed, and as I stepped into the dress, my dress, everything seemed perfect, that is, until I caught the faintest whisper of something out of place. It was a soft sound, like fabric brushing against the floor, and it came from behind me. I turned quickly. Clara was standing near the corner of the room, holding something in her hands. She was fiddling with it, her face slightly flushed. It took me a moment to realize what it was. My wedding dress, the lace on the hem was no longer delicate and pristine. There, beneath her fingertips, were small, deliberate tears, as though she had been ripping it. I felt my stomach drop. "Clara," I gasped, stepping forward. "What are you?" She froze, her eyes wide with shock, but there was something else there, too. A small, guilty smile that tugged at the corners of her lips before she quickly wiped it away. "Do you know how hard it is?" she said, her voice soft but almost mocking. "To always be the second one? To watch you get everything first?" She didn't wait for my response. Instead, she turned, tossing the dress aside like it was a discarded piece of cloth, and walked out of the room. My breath caught in my throat. I was too stunned to speak at first. Too stunned to move. And then, just as quickly as the moment had begun, my mother walked in, her cheerful face beaming. "Oh, darling, you look perfect. Don't worry about a thing. It's your big day." She gave me a warm hug before turning her attention to the dress. Her eyes skimmed over the ruined lace, the fabric that had once been a symbol of my future now marred beyond repair, but instead of shock, instead of concern, she did something I would never have expected. She laughed out a deep, rumbling laugh that filled the room and echoed in my chest as I blinked, disoriented, unable to grasp the moment. "What?" "Mom, look at my dress." "Oh, sweetie," my mother said with a smirk. "It's your fault, really. You should have waited. You should have waited for her to get married first. But no, you had to go and steal the spotlight, didn't you?" I stared at her, my mouth open, unable to process what she had just said. What do you mean?" I whispered, my voice small, the words feeling thick and foreign on my tongue. Mother's smile softened, but there was something almost knowing in her eyes. "Your sister is just, well, she's just a little upset. You know how these things are, dear. She was always meant to be the first one to wear the white dress. And you, well, you've always been a little selfish, haven't you?" Her words hit me like a stone to the chest. Clara, my sister, had sabotaged my wedding dress because of jealousy. But worse, my mother was laughing about it. Dismissing it. Saying it was my fault. That I felt as though everything I knew, everything I had been taught about love, about family, about being a good sister, was crumbling around me. And in that moment, standing there in my wedding dress, I realized something that terrified me more than the ruined fabric, more than my sister's betrayal. That it was all a game to them. A game where I would never win. The ceremony was a blur. That I can barely remember the walk down the aisle, or the look in my fiancé's eyes when I finally reached the altar. His expression was a mix of joy and admiration, but all I could feel was the sickening weight of betrayal, swirling in my chest like a storm cloud. Clara's actions kept replaying in my mind, her words echoing in my ears. You should have waited. She was always meant to be the first one to wear the white dress. What did she mean by that? What did any of this mean? Why had my mother, of all people, dismissed it with a laugh as if it were just a petty sister's squabble? By the time the reception began, I had managed to pull myself together enough to smile for the photographers and exchange pleasantries with guests, but my mind was miles away. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not by my guests, but by my family, as if they were all waiting for me to slip. As if I had done something wrong. The weight of my wedding dress, once so beautiful, now felt like a shackle. I found Clara standing alone by the buffet table, nursing a glass of champagne with an absent expression on her face. She didn't look at me when I approached, but I could tell she knew I was there. I didn't speak right away. I wasn't sure what to say. But finally, after what felt like an eternity, I spoke in a voice that was quieter than I intended. "Why did you do it?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Why ruin my dress? And what did Mom mean?" Clara's lips curled into a wry smile, but her eyes were tired, hollow. She set the glass down, took a deep breath, and finally met my gaze. "You really don't get it, do you?" she asked, her voice quiet, but full of sharpness. I could hear the bitterness there, but I didn't know what to make of it. I had never seen her like this. "Get what?" I asked, feeling a pang of desperation creeping into my words. "Clara, you ruined everything." "It's not everything," she interrupted softly. "It's just, you're everything." I recoiled, confused. "What are you talking about?" Clara stepped closer to me, her eyes narrowing, as if she were trying to decide whether to reveal something she'd been holding back for years. Finally, she exhaled and said in a voice thick with both resentment and sorrow, "Don't you see, Lila? You've always been first. First to get attention, first to have all the good things. First to have the perfect life. And here you are again, taking the spotlight on your big day." My heart dropped. Her words pierced me with an intensity one hadn't expected. I tried to speak, but she continued, her voice now trembling with something much deeper than envy. "I've always lived in your shadow, Lila. Always. And now, you're getting everything I ever wanted: love, a marriage, a life that looks like it's been pulled out of a fairy tale. And I just wanted to be the first for once." Her voice broke, and for a moment, I saw the hurt and vulnerability behind her anger. I was stunned. Clara had always been the beautiful one, the one everyone admired. She had so many friends, so many admirers. I had never once considered that she might have felt overshadowed, let alone desperate for her own turn in the spotlight. But then, as the realization hit me, I felt something deeper, something that made the pit in my stomach churn even more violently. "You knew," I whispered, my voice breaking, "you knew I wanted to be married before you. You knew this day was everything to me." Clara didn't flinch. She just stared at me with an unreadable expression, but the depth of her words sank in. She knew. She had always known. "I thought you'd wait," she said softly, almost regretfully, as if explaining the impossible. "But you didn't. You rushed into everything, and I didn't know how to handle it. And when you picked the dress, our dress, Lila, I realized that even that was going to be taken from me." I opened my mouth to protest, but she raised her hand. "I know it sounds crazy. But you can't deny it, can you? You've always gotten everything first. The love, the attention, the perfect life." She took a step back, her gaze shifting. "And now, you're the first to get married. Again." I felt the tears welling up, but I couldn't let them fall. I couldn't. Not here. Not now. I turned away and tried to steady my breath, feeling an overwhelming sense of guilt, mixed with anger, mixed with something else I couldn't name. "I'm sorry, Clara," I said, my voice thick. "I never meant for it to be like this. But you can't ruin my life just because you feel left behind." Her eyes glimmered with unshed tears. "I didn't ruin anything. You ruined it, Lila. By being first. By making me feel like I was always second. I wanted one thing for myself. One thing. And you took it from me. There was nothing I could say to make it better. No words would fix this." In that moment, I realized how much I had taken for granted. How much I had assumed Clara's happiness came without cost. How much I had failed to see her pain beneath the surface. But as much as I wanted to apologize, I knew this wasn't about me. It wasn't just about the dress. It was about something much deeper. Something neither of us could fix in a single conversation, let alone in a single lifetime. I reached for her, but she stepped back, shaking her head. "It's too late for that, Lila," she said quietly. "I've been second for too long. And now I think I've had enough." I watched her walk away, the finality in her steps a silent condemnation of everything I had failed to understand. My sister was lost to me, and I didn't know how to find her again. The reception continued around me, but I felt removed from it all. My fiancé tried to pull me back into the celebration, but I couldn't shake the image of Clara's face, the rawness of her pain, the depth of her jealousy. Every smile felt like a lie, every conversation an empty distraction. And then, as the evening wore on, my mother found me alone in a quiet corner of the hall, sipping a glass of wine and staring at the ruins of my wedding dress, now discarded on a chair. Her expression had shifted from the laughter she'd shared earlier to something colder, more calculating. "You know," she said with a touch of bitterness, "I told you it was your fault for being so impatient." I looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "You." "Lila," she said sharply, her voice low but deliberate. "You think Clara didn't see it? That she didn't feel it? She's always known you'd marry first. It wasn't the dress, it was the principle of it. You always take what's first, what's best. She couldn't stand it. She won't stand it. And neither will I." The coldness in her eyes made the room feel suddenly claustrophobic that I didn't know what to say. The truth was, I had never understood Clara's pain, or my mother's role in all of it. I had never truly seen what lay beneath the surface, the quiet resentment that had built up over years, and as the night wore on, I realized something else, that it wasn't just my sister who had been waiting. It wasn't just Clara who had been second. I, too, had been waiting for someone to tell me the truth, waiting for someone to say what had been left unsaid all along, that I thought I was getting married today. But in truth, I was merely stepping into a cycle I could never escape, and maybe, just maybe, that was the real wedding day I had been preparing for all along, the day I became just another part of the family's unbroken chain of firsts and seconds. The day I became second to my own life.